Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the ANC is on course to drop below 50% of seats in Parliament, meaning that the ruling party would have to form a coalition to be re-elected to form a new government. Also, just ahead of the deadline for candidacy for submissions for Rwanda's upcoming elections, fierce government critic Diane Rwigara, jailed over her 2017 attempt to throw her hat in the ring, submits her name once again to try to unseat President Paul Kagame. And the sounds of survival and suffering. Members of a Gazan conservatory find each other in Egypt after having fled Israel's continued destruction of their communities in revenge for Hamas's October 7th attack. But first, with about a third of the votes having been tallied in South Africa's pivotal elections, it looks like, as predicted, the ruling ANC is going to lose its three-decade-old parliamentary majority. The vote count so far suggests the party's well ahead on 42%. However, that is below the 57% it managed in 2019. We will later on in the day, in our follow-up bulletin, hopefully be hearing from our correspondents on the ground to break down what that means for South Africa going forward and what the ANC's play is likely to be if it does indeed, as it looks like, be forced into having to find a partner with which to form a coalition. Meanwhile, in Rwanda, the deadlines passed for would-be candidates for the July 15th presidential and legislative election. Amongst the 9 people up for challenging incumbent Paul Kagame for his job is fierce government critic Diane Rwigara. Our correspondent reports from Kigali.
The Rwandan businesswoman and political activist Diane Rwigara is one of the few opponents of President Paul Kagame and his party to reside here in the country. She went to the Electoral Commission this Thursday to submit a file as an independent candidate for the presidential election scheduled for July 15th. She hopes to perhaps face the man seeking a 4th term after 24 years in power.
I believe I have what it takes to bring the necessary change, whether it's economic, political or social. I have what it takes to contribute to the development of my country. I hope that 2024 will be different from 2017 and that my rights and the rights of others will be more respected.
In 2017, the Electoral Commission alleged that document in Diane Rwigara's file had been falsified and rejected her candidacy for the highest office, as she was subsequently arrested and accused of forgery before being acquitted a year later. After her father, businessman Asina Paul Rwigara, died in a car accident in 2015, the Rwigara family accused the Rwandan government of persecution. Kigali denied the allegations. 2 other opposition figures, Victoire Ingabire and Bernard Taganda, have been barred from running for president this year following previous convictions.
And now back to our top story, the ongoing count from South Africa's election on Wednesday. For more, we are now joined by our correspondent in Cape Town, Anne Wenzel. Anne, so the count does not make things look good for the ANC. No surprises there, but still talk us through where the tally so far has left South Africa's major political players following the vote on Wednesday.
Okay, if you don't mind me referring to it as a leaderboard, we've got the ANC on top, the governing ANC. The Democratic Alliance, the official opposition, is at number 2. They're the only party to have wrested a province away from the ANC in our democracy so far. And then there is at number 3, the MK party. Ally at number 3 is the EFF, and then the MK party. Now, interesting to me is that the EFF and the MK party both have the kind of stem from the ANC in a sense, because the Economic Freedom Fighters is led by Julius Malema, who was a youth league leader for the ANC. And then started the EFF in 2012, if memory serves, 2012, 2013. And then, of course, we now have the MK, the upstart MK party, 7-8 months old, and with Jacob Zuma kind of banging the drum for them. So maybe pointing to the fact that the ANC's problems largely come from the ANC, if you will, in a sense. And then we've got the Patriotic Alliance, which has been making waves and is taking some votes away from the Democratic Alliance. And the Patriotic Alliance campaigning on getting rid of illegal foreigners in the country, saying things like they take away jobs and we will, put them on buses and get them all out of the country. The Patriotic Alliance founder, he is one of the founding members, also campaigning on against crime, and he, being a former gang member and having been jailed himself, says, look, I was a criminal, I know how criminals think, and I'm the one to help you get rid of crime and the criminal elements.
So when it comes to the ANC, for so many months we've been, the polls were suggesting that it would have to, it would drop to below 50%, and would have to be looking for partners. Do you think that any preparation has been done on its part to do so? And who is it likely to be turning to form a coalition?
So, the ANC, I think, for a long time has thought, and Jacob Zuma has said it, and he's not the first ANC person to say it, but I do think he's the most famous and high-profile ANC person to say it. But they've said for a while, and he said it, I think, first in 2016, that the ANC will rule until Jesus comes. And I think that they largely did think that, and so probably have not thought about a partner. But if they were thinking about a partner, it's not going to be the MK, and it in all likelihood won't be the EFF. And who would it be? It would have to be a smaller party. But have they really thought it out? I don't know. Have they been bickering amongst themselves? Probably. Have they been arrogantly thinking that, Jesus is not coming, so we're good? I don't know.
Thanks very much for talking us through. We'll, of course, be keeping an eye on this as the numbers keep coming in. Thanks very much to Anne Ventel there for us in Cape Town. Now, around 100,000 Gazans may have crossed over into Egypt since Israel began its retaliatory bombardment of the Palestinian territory over Hamas's brutal cross-border attack last October. Tens of thousands of civilians, though, have since been killed. Amongst the survivors who've made it to Egypt are members of the Gazan folk band Maqam, who are helping each other come to terms with their enormous loss.
In this small studio in Cairo, these Gazan musicians are rebuilding their lives. Separated since the beginning of the war, they each somehow escaped Israel's bombings of their neighborhoods and by some miracle made it to Egypt. Now back together, they're trying to heal through their music.
When I sing, it's for my country. So far from home, it's a painful and difficult thing to do. But even if I'm not there physically, my soul is still in Gaza. By singing, I want to show all the love I have for my country.
Anas, the group's founder, managed to find a small house in Cairo where he feels safe with his family. But some of his former students from the Gaza Conservatory, like Najla, are still stuck amidst the conflict. They've managed to stay in touch.
She studies at the Edward Said Conservatory. I play the oud. I asked her to let me hear her voice, so she sent me this.
الفويس هذا جوا في
Visibly moved, Anas doesn't know if he will ever see her again.
7 سنين لما اجت على المعهد وكبرت عندنا في المعهد.
She joined the institute 7 years ago. She grew up there. Before the war, she was studying medicine. She was one of the top students.
فبتدرس طب كانت.
Far from home, Maqam's members cling to their music and memories of happier times in the lives they left behind in the Gaza Strip.
Well, the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, finally has a new government. It's taken a full 6 months after general elections to break the deadlock. Despite calls for a cost-saving downsizing of the government, the new cabinet still sports a pretty hefty 54 ministers, as Emmett Livingston from Kinshasa tells us.
Congo finally unveiled its new government on Tuesday evening after months of political jockeying. Led by the country's first female prime minister, Judith Suminwa, the new cabinet will have 54 ministers, down from 57, despite promises to reduce the size of the government. Close allies of President Félix Tshisekedi have been placed in key positions. A former special advisor, Jacquemain Chabani, for example, has been appointed as interior minister. Another close ally has been made Minister of Defence, with the previous defence minister, the powerful Jean-Pierre Bemba, given the transport portfolio. Expectations for the new government are high.
We'll see whether questions about purchasing power, questions about access to basic social needs, including food, which has surged, will be addressed quickly. This is a balanced team, and there is an effort to please everyone, which has created a huge government. We'll see whether they meet the expectations of the Congolese.
One of the major surprises of the new government is the nomination of a previously obscure opposition figure, Constant Mutamba, as Justice Minister. The National Assembly has until June 15th to approve the new cabinet. The ministers will face major obstacles, including solving conflict in eastern Congo and reviving an ailing economy.
Now, the world's biggest elephant populations is in southern Africa. And despite fears from countries in the region that it could lose more of them to climate change and drought, governments like Angola, Botswana, Namibia, Zambia and Zimbabwe are also pushing to reopen the international ivory trade. They say that ivory stockpiles could be sold to boost conservation efforts and development. Our Nyasha Chingono reports from a regional get-together on the question currently being held in Zambia.
For the past 4 days here in Livingstone, Zambia, we've witnessed environmentalists, conservationists talking about how to manage their wildlife sustainably. The hottest topic at this Gaza conference of the head of states was the need for African countries, and especially in this case, Southern Africa, to be able to sell the ivory on the international market. Southern Africa is sitting on $1 billion worth of ivory, which they have not been able to sell for the past 15 years.
And that is the reason why a very, I probably want to call it controversial discussion comes to the fore, the elephant in the room, on how best we're going to sustainably harvest our wildlife, how sustainably we're going to sell our stockpile of ivory. We just learned during your technical meeting that the cumulative figure that we're talking about in all the 5 countries cost $1 billion. You can only imagine how much of that 1 billion can go towards managing our natural resources.
According to CITES, a convention that governs the trade of endangered species, they are not allowed to trade in live elephants or in ivory. These countries are saying they are not able to fund the conservation needs from their budgets. They need to sell this ivory.
We regard this as an important resource and a resource that should be used to better the lives of our citizens.
Some conservationists have been agitating for Southern Africa, and in this particular case, the Gaza region, to pull out of CITES. They say CITES is no longer serving its purpose of making trade in endangered species smooth.
I believe that nothing will change. It will be futile to continue to submit proposals and make technical arguments when the opposition does not want to hear that.
The head of states converge in Livingstone. There is hope that they will make a bold decision of how to deal with CITES and end all forms of embargo that have been placed on the region.
Nyasha Chingono there for us in Zambia. Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now, though. Thanks very much for joining us. Do so again if you can. Till then, take care.
Special event.
6 juin 1944, la plus étonnante concentration militaire de tous les temps donnait l'assaut à la forteresse allemande.
Quand il y a eu des bombes qui sont tombées pas très loin, là, tout a tremblé.
Mon souvenir d'enfant de 8 ans, c'est que j'étais complètement terrorisée par ça, ce qui se passait.
Dad wore this kilt on D-Day and try not to get it wet.
Mais les groupes français, il y en avait pas énormément, mais il y en avait. Et ils étaient à la pointe du combat.
My wish is that we commemorate all together the freedom.
From the Normandy beaches to the United Kingdom and the United States, our teams will bring you full coverage of this historic event, the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings. Full coverage from June 5th to 7th on France 24 and France24.com.